In the 1970s, Venezuela was one of the richest countries in the world owing to the nationalization of oil production by the former President Perez. Crude oil became their main source of revenue, whereas oil exportation accounted for 16.7% of the gross domestic product and 95% of export revenue in 1980s, where the country reportedly has the largest oil reserve in the world, accounting for 18% of the entire fuel industry. The country reduced its focus on the agricultural sector, where corn and coffee were a staple, and focused on oil production. This reduced the contribution of agriculture to the GDP from nearly 50% to less than 5%. The country began to economically decline since the 1990s, where starting with the PDVSA, which is the government monopoly of oil production, which started embezzling money and corrupting the industry. Also, with increased oil revenues, the government increased its spending in the form of government handouts to the needy citizens and significantly reduced the tax rates. With all the excessive spending, the Hugo Chavez government had to borrow from external sources and carried out excessive money printing. This was the beginning of the Venezuelan hyperinflation in 1983. As the above-mentioned practices continued, the hyperinflation skyrocketed in 2016. The annual inflation rate was 4,000% in early 2017. This caused an unemployment rate of 13% at the time. After the COVID-19 pandemic hit Venezuela in March 2020,
the price of a Venezuelan oil barrel declined 7.6% due to the halt of transportation worldwide. This caused a drop in oil revenue of $17 million. Also, since the government started importing food items due to the aggravation of the food shortage by the pandemic, the gross domestic product of Venezuela contracted by 28% in 2020. As for the inflation of Venezuela, there was no severe impact due to anti-inflationary action that were taken by the government, such as dollarization and reducing price controls in certain sectors of the economy, such as on staple agricultural products. But it still ended the year 2020 with a high annual inflation rate of 6,500%. The unemployment rate of Venezuela increased up to 9.38% in 2020 from 8.8% in the previous year due to the loss of informal jobs created by social isolation. The minimum wage of Venezuela recorded a new low of only $4 a month. The main factor that affected this was the drop in foreign remittance due to the loss of jobs of migrant workers working abroad. As for fiscal policy changes, the fiscal policy response to the pandemic were very limited, where there was no suspension on tax collections and no tax incentives to companies, but there was a 15% reduction in tax revenue due to the shrinkage of oil production. To counteract this problem, the government increased the tax on basic services such as cleaning and telecommunication, which further reduced the domestic consumption. In 2018, the government of Venezuela brought forward a zero fiscal deficiency target as a measure for its economic recovery, growth and prosperity program, with an increase of value-added tax and a shortening of the collection period. But due to the fall of oil exports because of the pandemic, the tax base collapsed and Venezuela reported an external deficit of over $10 billion in the latter part of 2020 and was denied access to international borrowing from IMF due to earlier non-payment of debts.
Such is the impact of the pandemic on the Venezuelan economy. Thank you for watching.